Hello, this is Kristen Arnold, and welcome to a great webinar on how to run a great brainstorming session. So glad that you're here with me today, and we've got a great 45 minutes where we are going to talk about how do you run a great brainstorming session. We're going to stop for questions along the way. We've got some Q&A over on the side, so if you'd like to ask some questions, feel free to do so. So let's start at the very beginning, because I hear that that is a very good place to start. Brainstorming, when you're talking about brainstorming, it is, the definition, is a spontaneous group discussion to produce ideas and ways of solving problems. And it was actually started by Alex Osborne. He's the O in the BBDO advertising agency, and he wanted to get more out of his advertising executives. And so he developed this idea about harnessing the creativity of his team. And I just want you to be aware of the fact that this is not about making a list. Like, we have shopping lists, we have grocery lists, we have to-do lists, we have lists. Lists are in the realm of, well, they're the known. They are not the unknown. So if you're making a list of the 31 flavors of Baskin-Robbins ice cream, that is a known quantity. When you're looking for creativity, the unknown, when you want to expand, when you're looking for quantity of ideas, not necessarily quality of ideas, you'll get to the quality part later. When you're looking for, let's tap into unknown potential, let's see what's out there that we don't normally see, then that would be an opportunity to do brainstorming. And brainstorming is really the first part of what I call the GODA process. Not to be confused with Yoda. See, Yoda? Yoda. I'm a horrible impersonator. But GODA is basically an opportunity for you to generate ideas, and then you organize them. You decide what ideas are worthy so that you can then take action. As a facilitator, at a very meta level, that's what groups do. We generate ideas, we organize them somehow, we prioritize them, we flow them, we sequence them, we group them so that we can make decisions, and then we can take action. And great brainstorming sessions are really focusing on that very first piece of the process. It is not to be confused with organizing it or making decisions. So I want to share with you a story where brainstorming really came to light for me. I wrote a book in 2009, and its working title was Punch Up Your Presentations. And it was about how do we make presentations more engaging and interactive using some of my facilitation skills. And so I went into the publishing office in Austin, and the purpose of that was to brainstorm, create, not adapt from something else, but to create a title for the book. They didn't like Punch Up Your Presentations, and that was fine. So we got into the meeting, and somebody would say, well, what about this? And somebody would say, oh, no, that's too trashy. And somebody would bring up another idea, and somebody would go, well, I'm not exactly sure that that's got, yeah. And I felt like we were playing whack-a-mole. It was just one of the most weird experiences that I've ever been in. And I was like, this is not creating anything. This is not making me feel like we're going to get anywhere. So in true facilitator fashion, I said, hey, let's brainstorm this. Let's put the evaluation to the side. Let's brainstorm all the things that this book represents. What are the outcomes? Who are the people involved? And so we just brainstormed all those possibilities. And then we started brainstorming possible titles. And there was no evaluation, no comment, judgmental comments. And then we had them all on this big whiteboard, just all over the place, kind of a mind map of sorts. And what was really kind of cool is we all went, ooh, when one idea came up, and it was called Bore No More. Ooh. And we just started riffing off of that, and there was a lot of excitement around it. And we went, Ooh, that's pretty cool. Well, then when we went into the evaluation phase, we had a couple of ideas, and Bore No More kind of was like, ooh. We went into the evaluation phase and found out, oh my gosh, John Petz already has that. He wrote a book. He's got a movement called Bore No More to make meetings not boring. Well, you know what? I'm not really going to tread on his parade. And so we had to go back to the drawing board at a different date and say, okay, so what other possibilities are there? So there was a difference between the generation and then the evaluation. And in that generation, it might take one meeting, it might take several meetings. So we had actually 2 brainstorming meetings. One was face-to-face where we came up with Bore No More and a couple of other ideas. And then it kind of percolated. We knew that Bore No More wouldn't work. So then we had to percolate and go back, and in the middle of the night, literally, it was like a thunderclap. Boring to Bravo. Yay! And we floated that through the team, and it was another moment. And we did some further evaluation and figured out that that was going to be perfect for this book. So brainstorming is not playing whack-a-mole, where somebody brings an idea and they go, that won't work. Somebody brings another idea, that won't work. It is about brainstorming quantity, not necessarily quality. So we're going to walk through the process by which you can do that with your folks and not run into some of the issues that I ran into. Okay, so let's see. So the first thing that you have to do is set the stage. So when you set the stage, it's helpful if you're in a new location rather than the same office that you're always in. It should be a comfortable room with good lighting, or maybe some air. Windows would be a good thing. We tried doing, in the Coast Guard, we tried doing a brainstorming session in cinder blocks with no windows. I kid you not. And you know what? That's just not very creative. So you want to make sure that there's a good, comfortable room with good lighting. Have a good room layout, maybe a round table where everybody's looking at each other, or maybe a U shape if you have a lot of people. Have a wall for ideas, either a whiteboard or put lots of flip chart paper on a wall. Have some refreshments. You know, water is cheap. You can have water. You know, a couple of sodas, something to eat would be great. And then as people are coming in, make sure that you're welcoming to them so that you're actually setting the tone for creativity. Now, one of the questions that I often get is, how many people should you have in a brainstorming session? And I almost feel like this is like, how many people do you have to screw in a light bulb or something? The optimum size, really, in my humble opinion, is anywhere between 4 to maybe 8, at the very, very most 13. After that, it just becomes a little too unwieldy. So how many? 4, 8. 8's kind of a nice number, somewhere in there. And then the more you get out there, the more chaotic it can get. I also recommend that you start up with some kind of warm-up activity, some kind of icebreaker that just gets people to separate their thinking, because they're all coming from their workplace, or maybe they just got through dropping off their kids at school, or you know, maybe they just came in from Starbucks with a cup of coffee. I don't know where they're coming from, but start with a warm-up activity that kind of gets people in the frame of, oh, we're at creativity. We're going to be doing something interesting. I'm going to get to know the people in the room a little bit better. So start up with a very quick warm-up activity. And then you want to serve up a sandwich. Now, some of you if you've been to my webinars before, you know that I like using this analogy of serving up a sandwich, in that there's a rational side, which is the bread, and then there's the gooey jelly. So one side of the bread is the rational side of the bread, where you are teeing up the question that you want to answer. And this, in a brainstorming session, is critical, that you have the question that you are trying to answer. In the case of my book, what is going to be a suitable title for my book? I have seen brainstorming sessions go off the rails because this was not the obvious, it was not obvious and it was not clear to all. So make sure that you have the question that you're asked, you want the people to answer. Give the reason why this is important, the why, the purpose, and what the objective is. What's the background? How does it fit into the big picture? There might be some terms or definitions that you might want to clarify. So for example, I was talking with a client and we were talking strategic planning and operational planning and business planning, and it's kind of like those words were being interchangeable, and in my mind, they are not interchangeable at all. So get clear about what those terms are because you might be talking past each other. Then define the process that you're going to use, which is serving up a sandwich or the GODA. And then how long you're going to take this. Does it need to be done today? Do you need to have an answer for what the book is today? Or do we have time? Is there going to be some marination time? And I always find that brainstorming, a little marination can go a long way. So if you can switch it up between using your creative right brain for the generation piece and then the left evaluative brain as a separate meeting, that is perfect. Sometimes you just can't do that. Another handy thing is to aim for a certain number of ideas. Are you looking for 20 ideas, 21, 50, 2, what? You know, what are you looking for? And then ask if there is any questions about what the process is going to be. So everybody is clear about what you're going to be doing. And then you get into the creative and messy jelly, where this is the brainstorming. All the ground rules. You tell them what the ground rules are, and then you get into it. This is the point where all ideas are valid. There's no evaluation, no good idea, bad idea. Hitchhiking is okay. Actually, it's encouraged. All ideas are good. Remember, you're looking for quantity, not quality. And I really recommend that you don't settle too early. Like if you went, ooh, bore no more, too early, we wouldn't have had any grist to keep the conversation going. And Tim Herson talks about the third third. And I think that this is a fascinating idea to keep in mind when you're looking at brainstorming. And if you look at the brainstorming that you've been through, there are the obvious picks that come to the forefront. They're pretty mundane. Most people have thought them through. It's not very creative. These are the things that people probably brought to the table, and they haven't used the group synergy. So then usually there's like a little bit of a lull. There's like a lot of excitement at the beginning, and then a couple of minutes into it, then you start getting into the second third, which is more interesting, and it's based on prior knowledge and experience. There's some linkages, and these are the more interesting ideas, and they're more synergistic. Then the group kind of thinks, well, we're done. And I recommend that you don't, that you go into the third third where you're actually forcing connections. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how to move into the third third, where you come up with something unusual, innovative, or unexpected. This taps into the synergy of the group. And you might not use anything from there. You might use something from the first third or the second third. But if you don't even aim for the third third, all you've got is the usual suspects. And I would recommend that you don't do that. So here's an example of what I'm talking about in the third third. So Brian Tracy and I were, he was having a glass of wine, I was having a martini. We were cruising down what river, the Rhine, I believe it was. And we were talking about this phenomenon. So we started playing around with it and saying, oh, well, sales aren't high enough. This is a pretty typical question that it's brought to a table. Sales aren't high enough. Why are sales not high enough? We want to brainstorm the why in the problem-solving process. So we came up with some of these different ideas. If you look at the first piece, the first third, these are pretty typical ideas. We don't have enough customers. Our customers aren't buying enough. We're not converting enough prospect into customers, blah, 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 blah. Then it starts getting a little bit more thoughtful if you look at it. And then if you look at the last piece, and we really had to work to get to these ones, but thinking about we don't have a distinct competitive advantage that allows us to stand out as superior to our competitors. Wow. we wouldn't have thought of that in the first third, maybe not even the second third, or that the market has fundamentally changed and the demand for our product has declined permanently. I'm not sure that that would show up in the easy pieces. So, you know, you can kind of get that idea. So at this point, I am going to look and see if we have any questions. Any questions? Oop. Okay, so Q&A, let's look at those questions. And it says this feature is disabled. That's not right. There should be some question box. Are you guys seeing questions? Let's see, control panel. I have a new version of Webinar Jam, and so I can't see any questions. Well, that's kind of awful for you guys. I am so sorry. There is a chat. Well, I have a group chat. I can see a group chat. I don't know if you guys can see a group chat. Okay, can you guys see anything? In the group chat box on Google Hangout. Well, so this is going to be a learning experience. I'm going to have to figure out how to use the group chat again. So, I am going to assume that you've got some questions. And if you do, here's another way that you can do it. You can text me a message at 480-399-8489. 480-399-8489. Text me a message. So I just put that in the group chat. See if that's there. I don't know what happened, but evidently my Q&A is disabled and that shouldn't have happened. So, okay. So a text is coming in. See, this looks good. Text coming in, I like that. Okay, so how do you get into the third? That is a very good question. And I'm going to cover that in just a second. So if you can hang on to that, and I don't know who it was because it's just a text number. So, okay. So I'm just going to keep going. How's that sound? So at this point, we're going to be talking about facilitating the session. So when you're facilitating the session, there we go. So when you're facilitating the brainstorming question, you want to restate the question. And then you either want them to pause to think at that point, or if you were smart enough and had them think about their ideas ahead of time, maybe they brought in some pre-work. That's why I've got pre-work with a question mark. If you can help people get their first third thinking about it ahead of time, then that's like grist. It helps move the brainstorming session into the first third really, really quick. So, but if you don't have that luxury, then allow people time to pause to think about it first. And the reason why you want to do that is because extroverts, they think while speaking. And so you're going to get the extroverts who consume the conversation, and the introverts, and I'm generalizing, by the way, but the introverts will lean back and not participate because somebody else is already saying their idea. And so what you have is a dynamic where the same people keep volunteering their ideas. So I think it's a nice idea to let people think first. For maybe 30 seconds, it doesn't have to be a real long time. It'll feel very, very long to you, but let them pause to think. And then start the brainstorming session. Now, this is a matter of preference, as style and taste, depending on the number of people that you have in your room. If you have 4, you can do a freewheel popcorn of ideas because you only have 4 people, and it's going to be pretty obvious that everybody needs to contribute. But if you have a larger group, which oftentimes I do as a professional facilitator, I'll start with a round robin, which means I'll start with one person who looks very anxious and says, oh, I've got an idea. So I'll start with Mark. And then I'll say, so Mark, would you like to go to the right of you or to the left of you? And so he picks going to the right, going to the left, and that sets the tone that we're going to go around the room. I make it sure that people know that it's okay to pass, but we're going to start with a round robin. We do it once, maybe twice, and then I'll open it up to a freewheel, or some people liken it to a popcorn effect. You know, you've got a bag of popcorn that starts popping, kernels start popping very, very slow, and then a whole flood of ideas come out. So I would recommend that you start with a round robin, especially with groups of, I would say about 7 or more. And one of the things that facilitators you really need to do, and I don't see facilitators do this that often, is to encourage new ideas, to actually push for new ideas. You know, like if somebody says something, then challenge the group and say, so what can you do on top of that? How can you build on that? Make sure that you're asking all. Maybe we haven't heard from somebody, so maybe you might want to say, you know, we haven't heard from you. Is there something that you'd like to encourage? Kind of invite participation. And your challenge as a facilitator is to keep it moving. There will be some lulls, and usually those lulls are between the first and the second, third, and then the second and the third. So you want to make sure that you keep that moving. And as you're facilitating it, it's really important that you acknowledge people's input. And you acknowledge them typically by writing it down. But the key here is to be non-judgmental. Thank them for the idea. Use we language rather than I like that. That's I, and I'm being judgmental. Say, so how can we build on top of that? What can we do with that? We thank you for that idea. And this is a really subtle technique, but I would really recommend that you don't use individual names, because that's kind of pointing people out, and people are very competitive. So you want to make sure that you just keep it very collaborative and use eye contact to encourage people to have ideas. Try to make some linkages to encourage new ideas and to push people's thinking. Encourage others to rephrase what somebody has said. Like if you don't really understand, and you're a good litmus test, but if other people, their eyes look like they're not quite understanding what you're trying to do or what they're trying to say, ask for somebody to rephrase it. Or I'll ask the speaker to say, could you headline that for us? And then I'll ask somebody else, can you add to that idea? Acknowledge their input. And this is where flip chart paper comes in really, really handy. Write it down in their words. As facilitators, sometimes we translate, and we translate into what we think we heard. And if we're not using their words, it's not theirs, it's now your translated version. And one of the things that you really want people to see is their fingerprints somewhere in that brainstorming list. Somewhere in that list, their idea has been heard and evaluated, or heard and understood. Not evaluated yet, understood. That's what this piece is, heard and understood. Make sure people understand at this point what it is that they're saying. Because when we go into the evaluation point, all you've got are chicken scratchings on a flip chart. People need to have that understanding of what the idea is. You also need to figure out if you want to make this a list or if you're going to organize them. So if you're going to try to prioritize the ideas, you can list it like idea, just a list, like a laundry list. But if you're going to want to categorize the ideas or sequence the ideas or flow the ideas, I would highly recommend that you have everyone write their ideas on a Post-it note or an index card. So there's 2 things that this accomplishes. Number 1 is it allows you to move the ideas around very quickly. The second thing is that they're writing it in their words. You're not having to translate for them. So write it down in their words. And the key here is make sure that each idea is on a separate sticky or a separate index card, and that it's legible. Legible is really important. Can I reiterate that. Legible is really important. So I like to put sticky notes, the super stickies, super post-it notes, along with some Sharpie markers that are nice and thick, that allows people to write their ideas down very clearly. Very clearly. Now, as a facilitator, you're going to need to like push and encourage to stimulate the ideas. So caffeine is a good thing. Sometimes when you're falling into a lull, get people to just move around, get them to change places, or and this is, you know, it's completely dependent on your personality and the group's personality. But, you know, I've seen people who get up and do a little calisthenics thing, or, you know, get and rub each other's backs for 15 seconds, or, you know, switch chairs, play musical chairs, get people to move about, to look at things differently. Another way that I've seen people stimulate ideas is to take a look at the worst and then turn it around. So let's take the example of my book. What would be the absolute worst title for a presentation skills book? And then turn that around. Sometimes that just sparks the juices. It's not that that's going to be the right answer, but maybe that sparks some juices, some creative juices. You can eliminate all constraints. If all constraints were gone, if you could wave your magic wand, if there were no challenges, no problems at all, you could eliminate all constraints. That might stimulate some thinking. Another way that I've seen facilitators stimulate thinking is to add a roadblock. Like if you couldn't say presentation in a book title, how would you call it? What would you call it? And that might stimulate some ideas. So that is some opportunities for you to really get people past the first third and the second third, and maybe even to the third third. The other thing to be aware of as a facilitator is to be aware of groupthink. And this is when groups get in a rut and they just start thinking down one path. And you know how this happens. We start thinking around one facet of the brainstorming idea, and we're not looking at multiple facets. So let me give you an example. And this is not a business example, but I do this in my facilitator training. Is a list of the 31 flavors of Baskin-Robbins is a list, but we could brainstorm a new flavor for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. See, so the difference between I'm trying to get back from, there we go. Since I'm telling a story, I might as well show my lovely face. So if you're trying to brainstorm flavors to Baskin-Robbins, you're looking for creativity. You're not just listing the current flavors. So brainstorming, creativity, and usually people come up with some very funky ideas. So you want to make sure that as you're brainstorming, that people are articulating it so people can understand. You know, so I've seen pizza ice cream. Well, what's in pizza ice cream? You know, we can brainstorm off of that one. So you might see that people go down a certain rut where now we just start talking about the different flavors of pizza ice cream. And maybe we're exploring that enough, and we need to get back into the more global question that we're trying to ask, which is we're trying to develop a new flavor for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. So what are some other flavors? So you really need to push the group to not get so narrow focused into a certain conversation. That's groupthink. So just be aware of that. The other thing that you can do is to use technology to help assist you in this. And I'm really not going to be talking too terribly much about technology, but I just wanted to point out a couple of easy programs that you can use that might assist this process. There's a whole slew of electronic meeting management software that you can use, that you can tap into. And maybe your company actually has access to some of these. And especially when you're working with some of the younger generation. I'm a boomer, I'll admit it. You know, some of the folks really prefer using some technology to assist. So as you know, one of my favorites for panel moderation as well as easy polling and ideas is Slido, sli.do. And you can ask ideas. And the neat thing about asking here is that once you're through brainstorming, just have people brainstorm, put it in there. They can then scroll through the list and put a thumbs up, a like on the things that they like. So then you can very quickly prioritize that list. The only problem with using this technique, this technology tool, is that you're going to have some redundancies. So for example, let's say somebody puts down pizza ice cream and somebody else says pizza ice cream. There's really no way to merge those. So maybe there might be 5 people who liked the first pizza ice cream on the screen and the other one didn't even get seen or liked. So that is one of the drawbacks. The other thing that you can do is use Meeting Sift, which one of our listeners is part of. And he sent me, you know, have you ever used Meeting Sift? And the reality is I haven't, but it looks like a pretty cool and easy tool. So I would recommend that you go check that one out. And then there's also Poll Everywhere, which is a pretty easy meeting, same kind of thing as Slido. Slido is free for up to 1,000 people. Poll Everywhere, if you go for more than 40, and it uses more texting, your phone texting, versus Slido is a web-based. So it just uses different devices. So if you've got a group that's more text-enabled versus web-enabled, Poll Everywhere, and it fits less than 40, which hopefully for a brainstorming session, it is less than 40, but sometimes you want to do like a town hall type of thing. Otherwise, I would use Slido. So those are some technology considerations. And I'm sure that there are others. Feel free to comment or send me an email. I'd love to hear what kind of technology that you are using. So now you've got lots and lots and lots of ideas, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of ideas. You want to thank people for those ideas. You want to recap what you've done. Wow, look, we've come up with 50 new ideas. Check that out. One of the things that I love to do is to ask for key themes or takeaways. So what'd you learn from this? What are some key themes that you heard? Sometimes the way that their brains are working, the key themes are a quick way to organize or to sort all of those ideas. And their takeaways might be, oh gosh, we were able to come up with so many great ideas that we hadn't even considered. Or I had no idea. Or, I did have an idea. You always want to give people a way to say, hey, if you've got more ideas, send them to, because people will percolate on this. They'll percolate about this question, and then they'll come up with an idea and go, God, I should have brought that up in the meeting. So give them a way to contribute that idea, and then send out that unedited brainstorm list. So don't edit it, don't clean it up, just send it out to everybody, and that might spark their ideas as well. And then share the next steps. What happens with this brainstorming session? What galls me, it absolutely galls me when people roll up the flip charts and they go sit in the corner of somebody's office and nothing happens. Just frickin' drives me nuts. So I would recommend that you clarify what the next steps are. And the next steps in the GOTA process is that they have to be organized. And they'll get organized in some way so that you can make a decision and take action. And that organization is really where the evaluation comes in. So if there's a stupid idea, it's just not going to get evaluated. It's not going to come to the top of the idea. So don't worry about, oh, Kristen, we can't We can't do judgment? No, you can't. You shouldn't. That's not right. It's just not right. So when you evaluate, you can prioritize or rank the ideas. That's what a lot of people do. So the top vote getters will get to the top. Never, ever take the top vote and assume that it is the right vote. What it is the top vote, but there are still some people in that room who don't think it's the best idea. So never, ever take the top vote. You can organize them or group them or cluster them according to a theme. Or in the case of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, generally they get organized by vanilla-based or fruit-based or chocolate-based or dinner-flavored based, or, so the group will come up with their own ways that they want to organize the ideas. You can also sequence or flow them. First we need to do this, then we need to do this, then we need to do this. And what I love about this piece of the evaluation piece is that this is the opportunity for different ideas, those top ideas, to really synergize. And that's where boring to Bravo came from. It's not like we came up with boring to Bravo in the first brainstorming session, but we did come up with boring, obviously. We came up with Bravo. I used to be in the Coast Guard, and if you did a really good job, your skipper would say, "Bravo Zulu." Don't ask me why, but Bravo is part of bravissimo, clap, good job. And so those pieces were part of the brainstorming session. They didn't come together until in the evaluation phase, which is kind of interesting. Might come together in the creative, messy part, but this one was in the evaluation phase because it was in the top pieces that we started kind of putting together, kind of like you're trying to put a puzzle piece together. And sometimes those pieces look like they'll fit, but they don't. Sometimes they don't even look like they're going to fit, but they do. So check that out. So that is the rational bread part. And I think at this point, I'm going to look for questions that we don't have enabled. And I really apologize. So I'm going to figure that out. I'm looking to my phone to see if there are any questions. And there is a question. Oh, thank you. So June asks, so how do you prefer sending out the edited list? So obviously, if you're using technology, you can just export into a file and send it by email. That's the easiest thing that you can do. I would recommend that, I really like Bob Pike's idea. He says, never do for the audience what they can do for themselves. So if you're leading the facilitation meeting, the brainstorming meeting, I would have somebody else take the job of taking the meeting minutes, taking the flip charts and transposing them, or sending it out. Some people just like taking pictures of the flip chart and sending out as an email. It depends on what you're going to be doing with them. The other piece is that you don't have to be the one who's always writing the things on the flip chart if you're using a flip chart. If you are going to use someone else in the team to scribe, for example, you don't have that great of writing. I know some facilitators don't. It's always handy to get somebody else because the more participation you have, the better off you are. Just make sure that you give a little just-in-time training to that person who is going to be writing on the flip chart. Make sure that they write legibly in nice, tall, capital letters. About 2 inches is good for groups of like 8 to 13. If it's a smaller group, you can use a smaller piece of paper. If it's only like 3, you can just use a legal pad. Pick a way that people can see that their ideas are heard and understood. And it doesn't always have to be you. One of the other techniques that I like to use if you're writing on a flip chart, especially for brainstorming, is I'll use different colored markers. So you always want to use dark colored markers, but you want to use like black and then blue or black and purple. I don't like purple and blue so much because they look really similar to each other, but maybe you use brown and green, dark green. Don't use light green. Don't use a highlighter green. And then that way you can capture the ideas. Okay, So I hope that that's helpful, June. Great. And so those are all the questions that I have for right now. But I hope that you got, so I hope that you got some good ideas about how to lead a brainstorming session. Keep in mind that you want to serve up a sandwich. You want to set the table, set the stage. You want to explain what it is that the question is, why it's so important. Then you want to move into brainstorming, make it keep it moving, and don't settle for just the first third or the second third. Mix it up, keep it moving, push the ideas, and then when you're done, finalize it, thank people for their ideas, and tell them what you're going to do with the brainstorming session. So you have been a great group. I really appreciate you being part of our webinar here. And yeah, there you go. And just keep in mind that we do this all the time. We brainstorm with groups, we facilitate meetings, we're panel moderators, and we would love to be able to help you. Our next program is the 10 life hacks to an amazing presentation, and that's on December 10th. That's about 3 months from now. I hope you enjoyed this webinar, and I will be sending a replay link along with the slides that's attached to SlideShare, as well as a replay link and the handout. So thanks for being part of a great webinar, and we will see you on the other side. Thanks.